Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Irfan, I'm a maker. This is video number 2 in a multi-series set of videos that I plan on publishing, capturing my beginner's journey, designing and making an oud. If you have not looked at my intro video, I've provided a link below. It may be helpful for context. In this video, we're going to look at the anatomy of an oud instrument, its different components, parts that have to be designed, made, and assembled together. But before I do that, for those of you who may not be familiar with the oud instrument, I'm going to play a short clip of Master Munir Bashir performing a taksim. Taksim is an improvisation. And this clip is from an old TV broadcast archive. The year is 1969. I hope you enjoyed that short clip of Master Munir Bashir performing. If interested, I've got a link to that full performance, the TV broadcast archive, in my description. The oud instrument is thousands of years old. Its origins can be traced back to ancient Mesopotamia, historical region of the Middle East, which is modern-day Iraq, parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran. The name oud is derived from the Arabic word for wood. The instrument was introduced into Europe through North Africa when Moors migrated into Spain, the region of Andalusia, Andalus. It went through significant transformation between 8th and 15th century, so a separate neck, sound holes, and some of the other key features that you see in modern day oud took place during that time frame. The instrument spread through the Islamic world and became a core element of Islamic and Arabic music. Later, it influenced the development of the European lute. So this is a still comparing the European lute to the Arabic oud. What you're seeing here is a still of a performance by Herringman and Salame. They are performing Cantiga 353. It's a medieval song from the 13th century. Herringman has a lute strapped around his neck, and Salame is on the oud. I've provided a link in my description to the performance, and I would encourage you to take a listen. It's beautiful. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to take a physical oud and describe the different parts that make up the instrument, so we start getting an understanding of all of the different components that we got to design, make, and assemble to build the instrument. In my humble view, building a musical instrument, not only the oud, building any musical instrument is a form of art. It is the highest form of craftsmanship, to build an instrument that is not only aesthetically pleasing, but also has a beautiful voice. That is our objective, and we hope that through this journey, we accomplish that. So let's look at the different parts of the oud. This is my oud. This was a picture sent by the maker before they shipped the instrument. This is looking at the oud facing the front. Notice that the shape of the oud is shaped like a pear. And this is the back of the oud. So this is a picture of my oud laying on its face. The bowl of the oud is the main body. It is a pear-shaped resonant chamber, and it's constructed of multiple staves or ribs. This is hardwood. My bowl is constructed of walnut, mahogany, and then ebony. And also the maker has opted to use, I don't know if it's visible in the picture, but They've opted to use ebony spacers between the walnut and the mahogany ribs. Um, so these ribs are glued to each other, and then they are glued to a tail block down here behind these ribs that you are seeing. So on the other side of this hollow uh, bowl is the tail block, and this piece right here, it is a tail cover plate. In this particular situation, the maker opted to use a plastic cover plate. The preference is, of course, use mother of pearl or some sort of a inlay. It's mostly for aesthetics and gives it some rigidity, some support as well. Okay. Now, typically the number of ribs vary. The Arabic makers, they prefer to use 13 to 17 ribs. The Turkish makers use more. My oud is made in Turkey, and the maker opted to use 23 ribs. Now, again, the higher the number of ribs, it will give a smoother shape to the bowl. But of course, it is more work. So there's a compromise between the number of ribs that you want to use for your oud construction. Okay. Now there are from a geometric perspective, the bowl can be symmetrical or non-symmetrical. My bowl is symmetrical, and most ouds, I think they are symmetrical. Symmetrical meaning that the width of the bowl is twice the depth of the bowl. Okay, so the depth of the bowl right here is the highest point to the face, and the width is from the left to the right. Right. So this bowl, the depth is 18.25 centimeters, and the width is 36.5 centimeters, and the length of this bowl is 49.5 centimeters, so it's almost close to 50 centimeters. Okay. Okay, so this is another view of the bowl. I talked about the tail end and the tail block earlier. The other end of this hollow chamber, the bowl, okay, is where the neck attaches. So this is the neck of the oud, and similar to the tail block, on the side of this hollow chamber on this neck end is a neck block. The neck is going to attach to that neck block either through a dovetail joint or a dowel. And similar to the tail side, where the ribs are actually glued to that tail block. Similar to that, the ribs are going to be glued to the neck block on the neck side. Okay. Now in this view, it's more clearer on the depth of the bowl that I'd commented. So if you go along the x-axis and then measure this maximum depth on the y, that's the 18.25 centimeters for this particular bowl that I'd pointed out, which is half of the width, which is I would like to add on to my previous comment on the number of ribs. The Arab makers, they prefer 13 to 17. The Turkish makers prefer higher. And for this particular bowl, it's 23 ribs. But irrespective, the number of ribs is always going to be an odd number. The reason for that is that the center rib, right, it spans both halves. Okay. And the reason for that is because you don't want that center line to be the weak point of the bowl. Okay.
So therefore, there's equal number of ribs on either side of that center, and that what gives the bowl its odd number of ribs. So this view here is the neck block and the tail block of the oud bowl that I'm making. There's a mistake on this neck block. This shouldn't be a semicircle. I have to correct it. It has to be somewhat flatter. But irrespective, this surface of the neck block is where the ribs are going to attach. They're going to be glued. And this surface of the tail block is where the ribs are going to be glued on the tail end. So on the tail end, on the neck end. Okay, this shows another view of the neck block and the tail block. Okay. The important thing is to call out here is that the neck block and the tail block, okay, the profiles have to match the profile of your oud bowl. These are not interchangeable between bowls. Okay, so they have to fairly accurately, fairly precisely match the profile of the oud bowl that you have designed and what you're making. And I'll go into more details on in future videos. A few quick comments on the wood selection for the bowl and the neck and the tail block. Okay, the bowl is made of hardwood. There's an entire science behind wood and wood selection that I will share in future videos. Right. Some of the options that are available, walnut, mahogany, maple, so on and so forth, fairly common, right? Uh, but you can experiment, right? I like to mill my own lumber. Um, so I've got some local lumber here. So this is hackberry, cedar elm, okay, and ash, okay. Uh, the outside of the other key characteristics that you got to look for when you select the wood, even beyond quarter sawn, flat sawn, rift sawn, which I hope to get into more details. The key characteristic here for the selection of the wood that you would use for the bowl is bending properties. Okay, you have to be able to bend the rib blanks. Okay, now if you look at the bowl profile, the bend on the neck side is not as sharp, but if you go toward the tail end of that bowl, right? I mean that's a fairly reasonably sharp bend. So the key property, the key characteristic of the wood for that you use for making the bowl, irrespective of all of the other, you know, preferential characteristics you would look at, is the bending property of that wood. Okay. So let's quickly look at the wood selection for the tail and the neck block. They've got to be softwoods. I've got spruce here on the bottom and cedar on the top. Okay, you can use any softwood for the neck and the tail block as long as the wood is easy to carve and shape. Okay, if you look at some of my earlier videos, I struggled making the neck block for multiple reasons, but one of the key reasons was I didn't know enough at that time, and my wood selection was incorrect. I was using fir. Fir is extremely fibrous and is difficult to shape and carve. My go-to preferential wood for making the neck and the tail block is spruce. Spruce is also used for making soundwood. It's a tone wood. It's an excellent tone wood. So moving on to other parts of the oud, this is a nice view of the front of my oud. So on the other side of the bowl is the soundboard. Okay. So my oud has a cedar soundboard. The other option is spruce. Spruce has bright and punchy tones. Cedar has warm, resonant tones, and I preferred that. Uh, Now on the underside of the soundboard, so this is the soul of the oud, okay? So on the underside of this soundboard is special bracing. Makers have different designs of how they configure the bracing, and that gives the special characteristics for the sound that they want the instrument to produce. In my journey, I have not advanced that far ahead, um, but I will get to it. But again, this soundboard, uh, in my view, it is one of the most complex and demanding designs and build aspect of the oud, because this is where the voice of the oud is defined. Okay, so on the soundboard, you have either one or three holes. My oud has three holes, three sound holes. Okay, and some makers leave these open. Some have rosette in this. I mean, these are made of wood and on a scroll saw, special designs. Okay. In addition to that, on the soundboard you have the bridge, right? So this is a fixed bridge oud. So the bridge is fixed with glue right on the soundboard. Adjustable bridge where the bridge is right here on the heel. Okay. Then in addition to that, you have the pick guard, which is a veneer, right? Again, it's glued on the soundboard. And finally, you have the armrest right here. Okay, so this protects the surface of the soundboard when you put your arm when you're playing, right? So any sweat, so what have you. Okay, so that. So while we are on this image, okay, uh, let me also highlight a couple of deeper engineering concepts. So the soundboard, right? The cedar spruce is fairly thin. It's only, I think it's about 2 millimeters thick. Okay, or even less, right? So this purfling right here. Okay, so there's a groove that is run on the edge, and there's a purfling, which is a thin strip of wood, hardwood that is glued on. Okay, the purpose of this purfling, obviously, one is veneer, because this soundboard is glued right on the edge of the ribs. Okay, so the one purpose is ornamentation, to hide that underneath, to hide that glue joint underneath. But more importantly, okay, this is a crack protection. What I mean by that is that if you bump the oud, since the soundboard is so thin, right? If you bump this oud without this separation of the purfling, if there's a crack, it will travel all the way across this board. Okay, so this purfling gives it that level, gives it that protection. Okay. Now I'd mentioned that there is bracing under the soundboard, right? So this is just a mil half to 2 mil thick piece of wood. So it's a very thin wood. So that bracing, the art of lutherie, right, where that bracing design produces the beautiful voice of the instrument. So that's one aspect, but the other aspect is that bracing gives this the rigidity. Okay, because otherwise the string tension, which is several pounds of tension, would flex the soundboard pretty drastically. Okay, So I thought that was important to mention. And also one additional item I would like to mention here is that in my oud, so some of the oud, so this is the fingerboard, okay, running from the nut to the sound hole, okay. Some ouds, the fingerboard uh, goes only up to the neck. I preferred, so the original design of this instrument, that's what the maker had recommended. I preferred the fingerboard run all the way to the sound hole. Not so much that, obviously, one reason being that, I could come down on the notes here, but more than that, I find this more aesthetically pleasing to have this ebony. And the final comment I'm going to make on this image is that the soundboard, either cedar, spruce, uh, typically these are two sections. Okay, so there is a center line, and this is one part of the soundboard, the second part of the soundboard, and there's a glue joint. Okay, now the reason for that is because this soundboard is quarter sawn. It's expensive. So if you want to pick a piece of cedar quarter sawn with special tonal, it's not. I'm not talking just construction grade cedar lumber, right? This is with special tonal qualities and premium grade quarter sawn cedar. Okay, for soundboards. A larger piece is going to be more expensive compared to smaller pieces, right? So along the same line. So again, this glue joint has to be same as on the ribs, but even more importantly, this glue joint has to be perfect. Okay, precise, no gaps whatsoever. Okay, and along the same lines, can you have more than two pieces making up the soundboard? Yes. It just increases the complexity and the amount of work because the pieces have to come together precisely, be glued together precisely, no gaps whatsoever. I also believe that using the more glue you use, it does impact the sound performance. Again, additional research that is required. Now, also one other thing on the bowl, on the inside of the bowl, right? I've shown a picture of the bowl from the outside, but on the inside of the bowl, on the hollow side, there is craft paper, so heavier craft paper that is glued where the ribs join together. And that is again to provide some rigidity and strength to the bowl structure. So the more the ribs that you use, the more glue you're going to use. And that also, my current understanding is it, in some form or fashion, does impact the sound quality. So all of those, deep dive details, I have to research as I proceed down this journey. So the next part, let's talk about the neck, which is this short section right here. So the neck joins at the bowl on the neck block. And I mentioned it earlier, it's either a dovetail joint or a dowel. This piece out here, that's the peg box. I'm going to touch a bit on it just in a minute. But the neck and the peg box, they are joined using a scarf joint. Okay? So looking at the neck from the front, okay? So it supports the fingerboard. I'd mentioned this before. Ebony fingerboard is made of ebony. It's a hard and dense wood, and it provides a smooth playing surface. But in addition to that, right, if you notice out here, this white piece, that's called the nut, okay? And this is, although small, but it's a critical part of the oud. So the nut, the purpose of the nut, there's three primary purposes of the nut, right? The first purpose is that um, it establishes the starting point of the string vibration, okay? So the distance from the nut to the bridge is the scale length. My oud scale length is 60 centimeters, and the 60 centimeters is divided in 1/3. So the neck, the length of the neck, right, is 20 centimeters uh, from the start of this joint, right, to the center of the sound hole. That's another 20 centimeters, and then to the center line of this bridge is 20. So 20 plus 20 plus 20, that's 60 centimeters. So when you are, and I'm going to go into some details when I go into, a mathematical design that I attempted on the oud. Um, but once, so you start with defining what scale length you want. I think the typical is 58.5 centimeters. I opted Arabic ouds 60 centimeters. My understanding is that 60 centimeters, uh, because that would also determine the depth of the bowl, okay, and the length of the bowl. So my understanding is that that gives a more bassier, more warm and deeper resonant sound. That's why I opted to go with 60 centimeters. Um, Again, so that's the first purpose of the nut. That is the starting point of the string vibration. Okay, and that's the establishment of the scale length. The second purpose of the nut is that there are grooves, slots cut in the nut where it supports the strings. Okay, otherwise the strings would just slide off the nut, or either this side or on the other side. Okay, and the third purpose of the nut is the sound quality, the playability. Okay, so the nut height determines the distance between the string and the fingerboard. There's more to that, but those are the three primary purposes of this small but critical part of the oud. Again, this nut is installed right on top of the neck. Okay. Also notice that there's no frets. All right. So this is a fretless instrument, and that's what gives the oud the microtonal qualities. Okay, the next component, the next part is the peg box. So this piece right here above the neck is the peg box. Okay, so the peg box houses the tuning pegs. So these are the tuning pegs. Okay, and these are typically made from ebony or rosewood. In my oud, they are made of ebony. Okay, and these pegs are similar to your violin pegs. So the one thing common with violin was the fretless fingerboard, except that violin is a board instrument and this is plucked, right? The other thing common is the friction style pegs. So these are not mechanical pegs; these are friction style pegs. Okay, and they adjust the tension of the string. Okay, the string on the other end is tied to the bridge. It goes over the nut and it's tied to the bridge. Okay, so they adjust the tension of the string. Okay, Now, one thing to notice is that the peg box, I think in one of my earlier uh, views, it was more clear that this peg box is angled, right? Between 45. So why is it important that the peg box be angled? Okay. So primarily it forces the strings, that angle, right, forces the strings to press down on this nut. Okay. That is the key. Okay. Now some modern guitars also have the head angled slightly, but guitars do have mechanical parts, so it is not that critical. But since these are all wooden parts and this is uh, friction based, it's even more critical that this angled peg box forces the strings to press down on this nut. Okay, and why is that important, right? Well, so there's three key reasons, right? And the first one is that without that angle, the strings would be loose on the nut, okay, and they would rattle and buzz. So this angle provides a clear sound, okay. The second reason is that this downward force, it locks the strings onto these slots on the nut, okay, so it keeps the strings in place. And the third reason is that this firm contacts helps the vibration stay in the strings longer. So, this allows the note to ring out. So after all of these different parts are designed, constructed, and jointed and assembled together, then we got to seal the wood and finish the wood, right? Look, wood is, even after the tree is dead, right? Wood is a living, breathing, organic material. So that sealant and the finish, uh, done correctly, not only protects the wood but also, enhances the obviously enhances the beauty, but also affects the sound quality, right? So if the finish is done incorrectly, the sound quality may potentially suffer as well. Okay, and then the final step in the process is the setup, right? So you install the pegs. You For the first time you're adding the strings, and then uh, you tune things and make sure that the intonation is correct, and all of that comes into play, right? So before I end this video number 2 in the series, okay, let me share a few thoughts, okay. uh, there's an old Chinese proverb that goes something like, you know 1,000-mile journey starts with the first step. This is a fairly involved and long process, okay. uh, yeah, it requires a lot of patience, but in my humble view, patience alone is not going to get you there, right? You got to enjoy the journey, right? So you got to have the passion to be able to provide the commitment and the dedication to get this project completed. Okay, it's a lot of it's a lot of there's a lot of excitement once you get started. Uh, I do it. It gives me great joy and peace and satisfaction. I don't need any other reasons beyond that. For everybody, there may be a different perspective. Okay, but if you're watching this video, there is a sense that you are interested to at least learn and try and get an understanding of what's involved. Okay, so I would encourage you to take the first step in this journey. The next video in the series, video number 3, is where I'm going to dive into no, not only from a design perspective, but focusing on the bowl of the oud. You know, share some of the insights into how to create the templates, the bowl profile template, and how to go start about making the ribs and getting the bowl ready for assembly. I appreciate you stopping by. I hope that you found the information that I presented somewhat useful, and I look forward to seeing you in video number 3.